go on this topic, I want to share with you that I myself am a child of divorced parents. My parents divorced when I was 14, and I went on to never being able to have my parents in the same room together ever again, right up until the point of inviting my dad to my wedding when I was 28, and he declined the invitation because he couldn't bring himself to sit in the same room as my mother. He was still holding on to so much anger. So I handle this topic with the utmost delicacy and seriousness because my experience is the antithesis of what I want for your situation and for your children. And it's reflective for me that my own experience has probably been that kickstarter to me finding myself in this space doing this work. We're going to touch on how to handle young children, right up into how do we handle teenage, adult-aged children. But before I go further, I want a disclaimer. This is general advice, and so much of my work in this particular space is about helping my clients script how to speak to their children relevant to the unique situation of their marriage, the unique personalities of their partner, of themselves, the unique personalities of their children. So I can only offer general advice here. So please take that in mind and apply it to your own situation as best as you can. If this is a sensitive topic and fear and worry about your situation, then I do recommend reaching out to me for one-on-one coaching, which I'll put some details below for you. The first thing we must address here is the actual marriage. The reason why is so often we stay married for the children and for the family, and we have a real story around that, and what we construct around that is a story about our marriage. Every marriage, when it reaches its end point, has two elements. It has a light and it has its shadow. The light is how we present ourselves to others about how our marriage is, the dynamics of our marriage, how it looks, how we want others to see our marriage. And what exists in the shadow element of a marriage is what's really going on. The things that you're doing that your partner doesn't know that you're doing. The things that you're thinking and feeling and wishing you could do that your partner doesn't know you're thinking, feeling and wanting. And so often we are focusing on the light and we are ignoring the shadow when we create a story about our marriage and its benefit to staying together for the children. And a very powerful exercise here for you is to write down, well, what is the light in my marriage and what is the shadow element? And if I brought everything out of the shadow into the light, what would be the truth of my marriage? Is it actually as good as I'm making it out to be, as I've held on to and projected to my children and others it being? Because so often the shadow element is actually the shaper of the actual relationship, not the light. And the light really is kind of the facade, the projection, the way we need to be viewed. It's a terrible statement to say, but one benefit of being in an abusive relationship is that there's nothing in the shadow. Everything's in the light. Everything is out to be seen. Everybody knows that this is not a healthy relationship. There's nothing hidden here. And so sometimes breakups for marriages like that are much easier because there is no shadow. It's all in the light. Where it gets complicated is when there is a shadow and everybody's been ignoring the shadow and pretending like the shadow's not there, or the children don't even really understand or know that there has been a shadow. So let's touch on young children. There's no need for them to know all about the shadow of your relationship, okay? This is where age appropriateness comes into play. I always, because of my own personal experience, always approach everything with the starting line of we are still a family, but it looks a little bit different because we're going to be under two roofs, but we are still always a family. And then, depending on the age of your children, is where you communicate different things that they are going to be able to receive and understand to the emotional depth that they are at. It might just be mum and dad have decided not to be married anymore because we are always arguing and we don't love each other like a husband and wife, but we're still your mum and dad. Nothing for you changes too much other than we're under two different houses now. That can be a very age-appropriate sentence. And please know in this situation, which was my own, that if you are separating and your children are young, that your conversation about your ex-partner is probably going to be ongoing for many years as they age and they become more emotionally aware. I know for myself that in the many years after my separation from my ex-husband, my daughters had many questions to ask me as they matured about my marriage, about why I left my marriage, about them seeing me being treated better and differently by other partners, and it brought up things for them. So you may not talk about everything initially with your young children, but expect with the years, as time goes on, for them to have more questions as they become more emotionally astute and emotionally aware. For teenage and adult age children, the conversation is different. Now, I'm not saying again to reveal to them the whole shadow of your relationship, but you can start giving some hints. And sometimes this is important if they are completely unaware or mostly unaware about the dynamics of your marriage, and that it's coming to a bit of a surprise, or at least they feel like you should give it more time, as many teenage and adult children can sometimes say if there has been more light projected and ignorance of the shadow in a marriage. For couples where it has been an abusive situation, sometimes teenage and adult children are fully aware and are kind of relieved that mum and dad are making this decision. But if there has been a heavy shadow element to your marriage and your children are not aware of the dynamics, then hinting at some of the dynamics about our relationship hasn't been good behind closed doors for quite some time. We didn't talk about this with you because I kind of hoped that it would go away. I never imagined we would reach this point of separating. I hoped that it would just work itself out, but we've reached a point now where it hasn't. Those sorts of conversations where you're acknowledging that there is more to mum and dad's marriage and relationship than you were aware of, and that you asking us to stay together for you, or you feeling sadness at us separating, is only because you don't know what's really been going on between mum and I. And if you knew, then you would understand. And another really powerful statement here is to acknowledge to your children that you wouldn't want to see them in a relationship with the kind of dynamic that you have with their dad right now or their mum right now. You know, that is also a very powerful hint at a shadow. And then I lead with their questions leads my response. How much of the shadow of the marriage are they willing to look at and receive and see? And again, this can become one of those things that as the marriage separates and both parties move on, the differences between the two of you grows as both of you make decisions that are aligned with who you really are now that you're free to be this version of self. And the truth of your marriage, the truth of the situation actually becomes visual to the teenage adult child. Always approach your relationship with your children in this scenario with a long-term viewpoint, because everybody's level of acceptance to change is different. And if you have a very heavy shadow in your marriage, and so your children's acceptance and realization of what your true marriage dynamics were is kind of a little bit off point because you kind of hid it from them, as well as even maybe hiding it yourself and not wanting to see it yourself, then you do have to allow them some time to adjust to the truth of their situation and to no longer buy into the facade and the light that you yourself bought into, believing that that was right and that was what your marriage was. A long-term approach is healthy here.